Julian Voss was 36 years old when the antique shop appeared on Aldgate Lane, and he was, by his own admission, in a bad way. He had been a promising pianist. That word, promising, is the most crushing word in the English language when applied to a person's 20s and then quietly dropped from the conversation in their 30s. He had studied at the conservatory on a partial scholarship, had performed in halls of increasing prestige through his mid-20s, had recorded a critically praised but commercially invisible album of original compositions at 28. And then, the way these things happen, the momentum had simply slowed. A concert series that didn't get renewed, an agent who stopped returning calls, a second album that never got funded, the teaching work that was supposed to be temporary, becoming by degrees the main thing. By 36, he was giving piano lessons in his apartment 3 days a week to the children of people who lived better than he did, performing at a wine bar on Thursday nights for tips and a tab, and telling himself this was a creative period, a fallow season, a regrouping. He had been telling himself this for approximately 4 years. He walked past the shop on a Tuesday morning in October on his way back from the coffee shop, where he wrote in the mornings, or tried to. Aldgate Lane was a narrow street of modest retail. A dry cleaner, a phone repair kiosk, a florist that kept unusual hours. He had walked this route every weekday for 2 years. The shop had not been there the day before. He was certain of this. It occupied the space between the dry cleaner and the florist, a space Julian was equally certain had been a bricked-up service corridor the previous morning. The window was thick with the kind of grime that takes years to accumulate. The sign above the door read, in faded gilt letters, "Antiques and Curiosities, 1887. The paint was peeling and the wood was dark and swollen with age. It looked like a shop that had been there for a century. The thing that stood out most, though, was a wooden carving hung above the entryway of a demon's face, laughing. Julian tells Sarah he stood on the pavement and stared at it for a long time, trying to work out whether he had simply never noticed it, whether it had always been there and he had been looking through it for 2 years, the way you stop seeing something that never changes. He spent a full minute trying to convince himself of this. He could not. He went inside. The bell above the door was old brass and made a sound that was less a ring than a tone, sustained and resonant and slightly off the notes he knew. The interior was what he would have expected from the exterior. Dense, dim, layered with objects on every surface, the smell of old wood and something floral and faintly chemical beneath it. Clocks on every wall, none of which appeared to be telling the same time. Glass cases of jewelry and pocket watches, stacked paintings, taxidermied animals he preferred not to look at directly. And at the back of the shop, partially visible through a gap in a display of ornate standing mirrors, a piano. He moved toward it before he had decided to. It was an upright, roughly a century old by its appearance, dark walnut case, ivory keys yellowed to the color of old teeth, the lacquer worn to bare wood at the edges of the fallboard. Someone had played this instrument a great deal for a long time. The bench before it was low and worn concave in the center. Julian sat down almost without meaning to and placed his hands on the keys. He played a chord, a single chord, nothing complex. The sound that came out of it was not the sound a century-old, untuned, upright piano should make. It was full, dense, like the instrument had a larger interior than its case suggested, like the sound was coming from somewhere behind the room. He played a scale, then a phrase, then, without meaning to, without having planned it, he was playing, really playing, the way he hadn't in years, the ideas just arriving, his hands finding them before his mind caught up. He doesn't know how long he played. It could have been 10 minutes, but it felt like the whole day. When he stopped, there was a man standing in the gap between the mirrors. He was old, or appeared to be. Thin, extremely upright, dressed in a dark suit that was either very old or deliberately antiquarian. White hair, pale eyes of a color Julian could not determine in the shop's dim light. He was watching Julian with an expression of interested satisfaction, the way someone looks when they've just confirmed something they already knew. He said, "You have the gift." Julian said, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have just sat down." The man waved this aside. The piano knows who should play it. He moved forward with careful, deliberate steps. It has been waiting. Julian asked how much it was. The man named a figure so low that Julian actually repeated it back as a question. The man confirmed it. Julian's monthly lesson income was 3 times that amount. He had the money in his current account. He said, "There has to be something wrong with it." The man looked at him for a moment with those pale, unreadable eyes. Then he said,
"There is a condition, not with the instrument, with its nature. I am required to tell you."
Julian said, "Tell me." The man folded his hands precisely in front of him. He said,
The piano amplifies. Whatever gift you have, it will make larger. Whatever an audience feels in the presence of your music, it will feel more completely. This is its nature and it cannot be changed."
He paused.
The condition is this: the smaller the audience, the more completely they will feel it. One person alone in a room with you and this piano will feel it so completely that they may not be able to stop.
Julian said, "Stop what?" The man said,
They won't stop feeling it.
Julian looked at him. He looked at the piano. He was 36 years old, and he had not played like that in years, and the instrument had cost less than a month of his own teaching income. He said, "I'll take it." The piano arrived at his apartment the following morning via a delivery service he had not arranged and could not trace. He did not question this. He was already, by this point, not questioning several things. He played that night for 4 hours without stopping. The ideas came the way they had in the shop, unasked, fully formed, arriving in his hands before arriving in his mind. He recorded everything on his phone. When he listened back the next morning, he sat at his kitchen table and did not speak for a long time. It was the best thing he had ever written, by a distance he could not measure. He thought about the shopkeeper's warning. He thought about it seriously, which he was aware was already an unusual thing to do. Taking seriously a warning delivered by a strange old man in a shop that had not existed the day before, but something about the way it had been said. Not a sales pitch, not mysticism for atmosphere. The flat delivery of information the man was required by some internal code to disclose, like a pharmacist reading a side effect list. He decided he would play publicly, in crowds. That way, the effect, whatever it was, would be distributed across enough people that no single person could feel it too completely. This seemed, at the time, like a reasonable precaution. This seems, in retrospect, like a man who had decided to believe the warning just enough to feel he had honored it, and not enough to let it stop him. He began on a Saturday morning in November, in the pedestrian plaza outside the Central Library, a spot where buskers regularly performed, and the foot traffic was reliable. He brought a small rented electric keyboard, not the piano. He needed to understand whether the gift was in him or in the instrument. He played for 40 minutes. A modest crowd gathered. A dozen people, then 24, the way street audiences build when something real is happening. They were appreciative. They left donations. Several stopped and stayed long past their apparent intention to. A woman cried, visibly, and seemed surprised by it. Competence, not the piano. The following Saturday, he brought the piano. He had rented a dolly and recruited his neighbor, a good-natured man named Patrick, to help get it down 3 flights and into a van. The logistics were absurd. Julian didn't care. He set it up in the same plaza, sat down on the worn bench, opened the fallboard. He played 1 note. He later tells Sarah that people stopped mid-stride. Not gradually, the way a street crowd assembles. They stopped. All at once, within perhaps 2 seconds of the first note sounding, as if a signal had been sent. Within 5 minutes, the plaza was thick with people who had diverted from wherever they were going, the crowd pressing in from all sides, silent in the way crowds almost never are. He played for 90 minutes. He could not have stopped earlier if he had tried. The ideas kept coming, and the crowd kept holding, and something between them was sustaining itself. A loop of output and attention that felt like a physical thing. When he finally stopped, the crowd made a sound that was not applause exactly, more like a collective exhale, like something being released. A journalist from a music publication was in the crowd. He wrote about it the following week. The piece was shared extensively. The next Saturday, the crowd was 3 times the size. Within 6 weeks, Julian Voss was the most talked about street musician in the city. Within 3 months, he had been offered a residency at a well-regarded performance venue, a proper hall, proper acoustics, proper seating, proper billing, his name on a poster. He called Sarah the night he signed the contract. He said, "I think it's actually happening." She said she was happy. She sounded it. He did not mention the shop or the piano or the warning. He had not mentioned these things to anyone. He had, with considerable discipline, stopped thinking about them himself. This was, of course, precisely when the warning began to come true. The residency was 3 consecutive Friday nights in February. The hall seated 220 people. All 3 nights sold out within 48 hours of going on sale. Julian performed alone, just himself and the piano, no support act, nothing between the audience and the music. The reviews were extraordinary, not just positive, disoriented. Critic after critic reached for language that surprised them in the drafting. Words like transcendent and haunted and necessary. One reviewer wrote that he had felt during the second movement of the final piece that someone in the room understood him in a way he had never been understood, and that this had been both the most beautiful and the most frightening experience he could recall having in a concert hall. Julian read this review at his kitchen table and sat very still. A woman named Clara attended all 3 nights. He noticed her first on the second night. She was in the 4th row, slightly to his left, and something about her attention was different from the people around her. Not more intense exactly, more focused, the way a lens focuses while everything around it blurs. After the 3rd performance, she was waiting in the small corridor backstage. She was composed and articulate and clearly intelligent, and she introduced herself as a music researcher at the university. She said she had been studying the neurological responses of audiences to live music and was deeply interested in what he was doing. She wondered, could she speak with him? Could she attend future performances? Julian said yes. He said it easily, the way you say yes to someone whose interest feels like confirmation of something you already believed. This was the first mistake that mattered. The months that followed brought more invitations, private events, salon performances, the kind of intimate gatherings hosted by wealthy people in large apartments overlooking the city. Julian accepted them. The money was significant and the settings were beautiful, and 50 people in a private room was still 50 people, not one. He had drawn his personal line at private one-on-one performance, and he had, consciously and deliberately, not crossed it. Clara attended everything. She always seemed to find out, always arranged herself an invitation. He began to expect her in the room. The way she listened, completely, without the small movements and adjustments of normal concert attendance, had at first seemed like intense scholarship. He had revised this assessment. She began to send him music, recordings of pieces she thought he should hear, then messages in the morning, long, careful analyses of his compositions that displayed a level of study that went beyond research. Then messages at night, questions about what particular passages meant, whether he had written them with a specific emotion in mind, whether he had written them for anyone. He spoke to Sarah about it. He said, "There's this woman who came to the hall shows. She's become a little, Sarah said, "A little what?" He said, "Attentive." Sarah said, "Julian, you have a lot of fans now. That's part of this." He said, "I know." He paused. "This feels different." He should have stopped accepting invitations. He knows that now. He should have looked at Clara's escalating attention and matched it against the shopkeeper's words and understood what he was watching happen in real time. He had been given a precise description of the mechanism. He had simply declined to apply it because the invitations kept coming and the rooms kept getting smaller. The salon gatherings of 50 became dinners of 20. The dinners of 20 became after-dinner performances for a host and their 6 or 8 closest friends. Julian told himself this was intimacy, not diminishment. He told himself the art was deepening. He was not wrong exactly. The art was deepening. That was precisely the problem. A collector named Harlan Bray contacted him in April with an offer to perform at a private dinner he was hosting for 4 guests at his townhouse. The fee was more than Julian made in 3 months of lessons. He said yes. Clara was one of the 4 guests. Julian didn't realize this until he arrived. He looked at the seating arrangement on the dining table and felt something cold move through him. He thought about leaving. He calculated very quickly what leaving would cost him. He stayed. He played after dinner in Bray's drawing room to 5 people sitting in upholstered chairs arranged in a horseshoe. 5 people and the piano and the high ceiling and the sound of the city muffled beyond the heavy curtains. The music he made that night was the most devastating thing he had ever produced. He could feel it as he played. Something from the instrument meeting something in the room and multiplying. The 5 people in the horseshoe were not listening the way audiences listened. They were absorbing. Their faces were open in a way that faces are only open when their owner has forgotten they are visible. He stopped after an hour. The silence afterward was very long. Bray eventually said something gracious, and the evening concluded. Julian left in a car he called from the hallway. Clara followed him out. She stood on the pavement and said his name. When he turned, she was looking at him with an expression that had moved past admiration and past affection and into something he did not have a clean word for. Something that wanted, something that was no longer asking. She said, "When can I hear you play again?" He said, "I will let you know about upcoming shows." She said, "Not a show, just you, just for me." He said no, gently but clearly. He went home and sat with the piano in the dark for a long time without playing it and thought about the shopkeeper, the pale eyes, the flat clinical voice. The smaller the audience. One person alone in a room may not be able to stop. He should have ended it there. Should have sold the piano, called the whole thing a strange chapter, gone back to the wine bar and the lessons and the fallow season. He did not do this. He booked a show at the hall for the following month, 300 seats. He told himself he was returning to scale, recalibrating, giving himself and his audiences air. He told himself Clara was just someone he would stop making eye contact with. 2 nights before the hall show, she was inside his apartment. He doesn't fully know how she got in. He had given her his business card at some early point, the one with his address on it, before he had stopped using that version. His building door locked with a code he changed infrequently. He has a memory of mentioning to her at the Bray dinner that he sometimes played late at night when the building was quiet. He came out of his bedroom at 11:15 to get water, and she was sitting in his living room. Not in the dark, she had turned on the lamp by the bookcase, the low one he used when he played at night. She was sitting in the armchair across from the piano, upright, hands in her lap, as though she had been there for some time, and was simply waiting for the rest of the evening to begin. He stood in the doorway, and the first thing he felt was not fear. It was a complicated anguish, because he understood completely what he was looking at, and he understood how it had happened, and he knew that the piano, 10 feet from where Clara was sitting, was the mechanism by which it had happened. And he had known. He had been warned, specifically and clearly, and he had decided the warning was a manageable variable. He said her name. She said, "I heard you playing last week, through the floor from the street. I sat on the pavement outside your building for 3 hours. I couldn't leave." She said this without distress, as a report. "I need to hear it properly, just once in the room, and then I think I will be able to..." She stopped. "I just need to hear it once, properly." Julian said, "Clara, you need to leave. Right now. I'm going to call someone to take you home." She said, "Please just play something, one piece. I will go after. I promise I will go after." He called Sarah. He did not call the police. He will explain this to Sarah later and will not fully be able to justify it, except to say that Clara did not seem dangerous in that moment. She seemed ill, and his instinct was not to summon authority, but to get someone who understood him there as quickly as possible. Sarah arrived in 20 minutes. She sat with Clara while Julian stood in the kitchen. He could hear Sarah speaking to her in the careful, level tone of someone managing a situation they have not been fully briefed on. Clara was coherent and calm and completely fixed, the way a compass needle is fixed, oriented toward the piano and toward Julian, and unable to point elsewhere. Eventually, Sarah got Clara into a car and out of the apartment. She came back upstairs. She stood in Julian's living room and looked at the piano and then at Julian and said, "What is happening?" And finally, long past the point when he should have, Julian told her everything. The shop on Aldgate Lane, the shopkeeper, the price and the condition and the warning delivered in the flat, clinical voice. All of it. He talked for a long time and Sarah did not interrupt. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Julian, you need to stop performing." He said, "I know." She said, "And that thing needs to leave your apartment." He said, "I know." She said, "Do you know where the shop is?" He'd already driven past Aldgate Lane twice in the preceding weeks. There was no shop between the dry cleaner and the florist. There was a bricked-up service corridor. He told Sarah this. They did not know what to do about the piano. They agreed he would cancel the hall show. He would stop all performances immediately. He would not play the piano, not even privately. He would keep the door to the living room closed and figure out the rest. He cancelled the show. He closed the living room door. He lasted 6 days. He does not know the exact sequence of what happened the night he played again. He knows he went to the living room. He knows he sat at the bench. He knows that some part of his mind, the part that loved the music and had always loved the music and had built his entire identity on the music, had simply overridden the rest of him. He played for 2 hours in the dark, deep in the middle of the night, the building quiet, the street below quiet, no audience, just the instrument and the music and the dark, or what he believed was no audience. The following morning, the building's exterior security camera, which his neighbor Patrick had access to through a building management app, showed Clara on the pavement outside from 11 p.m. to 2:30 a.m., standing, completely still. Her face turned up toward the window of Julian's third-floor apartment. Not moving, not leaving, not sitting down, just standing, looking up at the light in his window, listening to music through glass and brick and 3 floors of building. Patrick showed Julian the footage at 9 a.m., looking deeply concerned. Julian thanked him and went back upstairs and called Sarah. He said, "I played last night, I have to get rid of it." Sarah said, "Yes." He said, "I don't know how. I don't know who would take it or whether giving it to someone else is even... I don't know what that would do to them." A long silence on the line. Then Sarah said very carefully, "Then don't give it to someone. Get rid of it." He knew what she meant. He sat with it all day. That evening he called her back and said he was going to do it. She said, "Do you want me there?" He said no. He needed to do it alone. He needed to do it in the dark, the way the last of some things should be done. He owned a fire pit on the small concrete terrace behind his building, a remnant of a previous tenant's outdoor aspirations that had come with the lease and been used perhaps twice. It was barely large enough for the purpose. It would have to be enough. He dismantled the piano with tools he borrowed from Patrick, who asked no questions because Julian's face made clear that this was not a moment for questions. It took 4 hours. He did not rush. He worked methodically, removing the panels and the action and the keys and the strings, and stacking the wood on the terrace in pieces small enough to burn. The keys were the worst part. The ivory, yellowed and worn and shaped over a century to someone's hands. He put them at the center of the pile. He started the fire at 2 in the morning, not for symbolic reasons. It was simply when he finished. It took the fire a long time to fully catch the old dense walnut. He sat on the terrace steps and watched it. The music in his head, which had been for the past 6 months constant and generous and inexhaustible, went quiet as the fire grew, not immediately, gradually. As the wood caught and the strings failed and the fire settled into its work, the music reduced, as if a volume dial were being turned by someone else's hand, phrase by phrase, note by note, until there was only the sound of the fire itself, and then, eventually, only the sound of the city. By the time the last of it was ash and cooling metal, it was approaching 4 in the morning, and his head was quieter than it had been since before he walked into the shop on Old Gate Lane. He sat on the terrace steps and felt the absence. He would tell Sarah later that the absence was the most accurate description he could offer of what the piano had been doing all along. Not adding something, removing the barrier to what was already there. And now the barrier was back, and the music was still in him, but it was at a remove again, behind glass, the way it had been for years before the shop. He is not sure if this means the music was always his, or never entirely his. He has decided not to resolve this question. Clara received psychiatric support, which Julian arranged and paid for. She has improved. They do not speak. Julian does not believe she bears him any ill will. He does not believe she fully understands the worst of what she felt. He is grateful for this. He cancelled all remaining bookings. He still gives lessons 3 days a week. He plays the wine bar on Thursdays. He plays on a rented keyboard, and he plays well, by any normal standard. He is competent and feeling grateful for the sound a normal instrument makes in a normal room. He does not walk Aldgate Lane anymore.